Welcome to Soul Trek. This episode, Preparing for Fiona. As I'm preparing this particular episode of Soul Trek, the Hurricane Fiona is approaching Atlantic Canada. And we're preparing for that. This is Thursday. I guess it's supposed to hit sometime late on Friday and into Saturday. And we're taking the appropriate steps to try and prepare for it. I remember, I don't remember who it was, but I remember hearing a comedian one time on the television talking about, rooting for their namesake. There had been a hurricane that had the same name as them. They found themselves kind of rooting. Hoping that it would be a memorable hurricane. I just remember as the comedian was talking that it was a hurricane I remembered. So he rooted for a winning hurricane. So anybody out there named Fiona, if you're rooting for a hurricane named after you, certainly make a comment below, and it'd be interesting to hear if that's actually true. I don't remember a lot of hurricanes named John. Of course, there was Juan a few years ago, which is, kind of close. I think it's probably that. It's probably a version of the name John, but it wasn't John. So I've never had occasion to wonder whether or not I was kind of secretly rooting for a hurricane that was named after me. There's a hymn that gets sung, not very often in church, once in a while, perhaps. But certainly we sing it in nursing homes and sometimes perhaps at cenotaph services. Will your anchor hold in the storms of life? I don't think that's a question that's about hurricanes or the kinds of storms that we might face out on the ocean. That's the imagery that's being used, but I don't really think that's what the question is about. Will your anchor hold in the storms of life? It's not about hurricanes or sump pumps. Will your sump pump work in the storms of life? It's really about everything else, all the sorts of things that we might face, the things that might challenge our faith. So the question really is, will we remain faithful in adversity? And the adversity can come to us in all sorts of different ways. It could be an illness that we're facing, or an illness that a loved one is facing, perhaps. It could be the grief that we experience from time to time in our own life, or any kind of hardship that we endure. And indeed, people face those kinds of things all the time. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, even royalty must endure grief from time to time. And all of those things are very difficult. And all of those things can challenge our faith. In fact, sometimes our faith is challenged to the point, and I hear this from people once in a while, sometimes our faith is challenged to the point where we might even describe ourselves as having lost faith. Or not having any faith in those particular moments. But I think that question is really kind of a double. There's a double meaning to that, as there is when we talk about faith. Sure, from time to time, people's faith are challenged, and we can say that we lose faith, and that's unfortunate and difficult and challenging for us as well. And we do our best to be faithful to God. But like I say, that's not always possible. And I believe that when we can't, when we find ourselves in those faithless moments, God does not abandon us in those moments. When our anchor fails, when we no longer have that faith, God's anchor remains steadfast and true. That's really what the song is saying. That's the anchor that's being referred to there. It's not so much my anchor, which may or may not from time to time fail. This is really about God's anchor. that even in the storms of life, even when we find our faith challenged, even when we might feel as though our faith has been lost, God remains faithful to us in those times and at all times. But I do want to kind of emphasize that maybe, I mean, when Jesus says that he's come to heal the sick, those of us whose faith is challenged from time to time by whatever, may not be the ones who are really in need of that anchor that God provides. It's people who are significantly challenged in their lives as well, that God remains faithful and true for. God remains faithful and true for all of us, for sure, but particularly for us in those difficult times, and particularly for people who seem to be experiencing all kinds of reasons to grieve and to feel the hardships of life. God is here in this world through Jesus Christ and through the Holy Spirit, and hopefully through the actions of faithful people, Christians and others, as we try and help one another through these hardships, be it Fiona or any kind of illness, grief, or hardship that we happen to face in life. So that's the Soul Trek message for today, that even when our anchor fails, God's anchor will remain steadfast and true. Thank you.